So about a year ago, I realized this is not normal, and I do not want to keep feeling this way. I want to get better, and I'm going to have to deal with this head on in order to get better. I also realized that what kind of this all was anxiety, panic attacks, and depression for pretty much as long as I could remember. So it was about a year ago that I made that realization. It was around April and May of 2016. And then last September, I talked about it with you on episode 123 of the podcast. And since then, I've gotten so many emails and comments and conversations with people about your own struggles and what you're going through, and that it's helped. And it invariably leads to the question, so what do you do? What is working? And I've talked to you, a lot of you, in individual conversations on Instagram or email or conferences where I have shared what's working for me, and you all have encouraged me to put it in the podcast. So that's what we're going to do today. I'm going to share with you what I've found works with me over the last year. So welcome to Explore Your Enthusiasm, episode 153 with me, Tara Swiger. Usually we talk about an issue in your creative business and how you want to deal with it, but today I'm going to answer the question I get asked all the time. What are you actually doing about anxiety and depression, and what are you finding actually works? But before we get started, I got to make a lot of disclaimers. So, I'm always saying that people vary, and what works for one business might not work for you, and you shouldn't get caught up in what you see working for other people, and don't beat yourself up if what works for other people isn't working for you. So this is a scientific fact when it comes to your business. What works for some people does not work for others. All of the literature around mental health and even physical health reflects the fact that not everybody reacts in the same way to every stimulus. Not every body needs the same thing to be healthy, and not every medication works the same on every person. So what I say works for me might not work for you. Don't let that be another reason why you feel crappy about everything. Now, beyond that, I am not a doctor, and I'm not a researcher, and I'm not a psychologist or a psychiatrist, and mental health is a health issue. So please, please, please go talk to a doctor and deal with this. Do not rely on podcasts and blog posts and the internet to help you through this. Now if you are in an emergency situation, there is a suicide hotline I have linked up in the description and in the show notes. So call that. Don't wait till you can get an appointment with your doctor, but go see a doctor. I'm not a doctor, and this is a health issue. This would be like if your leg was broken, you would not watch my podcast to figure out what to do, nor anyone else's. You should just go to a doctor. So when I spoke about this on a panel at Midwest CraftCon, afterwards, a girl came up to me, or I kind of went to her table, and we talked, and she cried and told me how afraid she was to go to her doctor, afraid that they'd put her on medicine that would absolutely numb her out, and that she would hate how she felt, and she was terrified. And I cried with her because that's exactly where I was about a year ago. I was absolutely terrified to go talk to anyone about this for fear that I would be hospitalized, that I would go on medication that I hated, that I would be pressured to do something I didn't want to do. So I'm going to tell you what I told her, and that was this. You can always say no. You are in charge. You can tell your doctor or the professional what you are willing to do and what you're not willing to do. And it's entirely your body and your decisions, so don't let your fear keep you from going. That's part of the scariness about mental health issues, is then your own brain is telling you, like, don't go and don't deal with it. And also, your doctor has options and will most likely suggest options other than medicine. They can recommend a therapist, maybe a therapist that works with them. They can recommend a support group. They can recommend books. Like, every doctor I've talked to about this issue has said, like, here's a medication and you have to do this at the same time. And all the research I've read about it backs up that if you're going to treat a patient with depression or bipolar or anxiety or panic, medication works much better in association with these other therapies, like going to therapy and everything else I'm going to talk about today. So just keep that in mind. Like, it all works together. So don't think that if you go to the doctor, the only option is medicine. But what matters more than anything else, than anything I'm going to say, is you have to tell someone. You need to proactively seek help instead of hiding it, because of a couple reasons. The more you hide it, the more shame and fear you build up around people finding out, and the more dangerous that becomes for you, and the more your brain twists that into saying if people did find out, they would hate you and that bad things would happen. And the more you keep it hidden, the more actually dangerous it is for your health and your longevity. So tell someone when you're not feeling as bad. Talk to them about the times when you are feeling bad, and tell them what they can do to help you. So tell them what kind of questions they can ask. Tell them what you would most like them there for. Like, tell them why you're telling them and what they can do to support you. But telling somebody is really, really important. And they can often encourage you and kind of support you as you go see the doctor if you're afraid of seeing the doctor. One last disclaimer / confession. I absolutely hate talking about this. You can ask my husband. I hate talking about my feelings, although I really love making other people talk about theirs, which you will know if you've had a one-on-one with me. But I'm talking about it because I want you to know that you're not alone. I want you to know that it's okay to be exactly where you are. And I want you to know that you have options. And that above all, you have 3 things you need to do. You need to tell somebody, you need to keep experimenting and keep trying things. Keep seeing what's going to work for you. If it doesn't work one time, try something else. I'm going to give you lots of options of things to try, but the key is not to get stuck in feeling like it's hopeless. So I don't like talking about it, but you all have asked me to talk about it, and I know that it's helpful because of the messages I get back, and I know it's helpful when other people share. It helps me. So if I seem super uncomfortable in this video, that's why. So that's what we're going to talk about today. Things to try. People vary, so don't be discouraged if you've tried all this and you hated it. Like, that was part of my fear in talking about this, is I thought, like, what about the person who's done all these things and it didn't help and they still feel awful? Like, will this just make them feel more awful? So the overarching message is try something else, try again, and keep going. First, we have to talk about medicine. Now, again, I'm not a doctor. Like, guys, I'm really, really not a doctor. But because of this fear that a lot of people have about the doctor, I'm going to be honest with you about my own experiences. And I really struggled about whether I wanted to include this in this podcast or not, because I am so not a doctor and this is something that only a doctor should be helping you deal with. But so much of this was scary for me because I had absolutely no idea what to expect and what to do. And I didn't know what would happen or like what my options would be, that I know after talking to you guys that me talking about it is going to make it slightly less scary for you. So I told Jess that I wasn't sure if I should talk about medicine when it came to talking about my experience. And this is what she said. I so get that, but this is part of a reason why there's a stigma and there shouldn't be around mental health. If you had a heart condition, you'd take the medication that was going to fix that condition and it would make your body function the way that it should. Mental illness can often be improved with medication. It's something in your body that isn't working as well as it could, and the medicine makes it better. Of course, everyone has the right to refuse treatment for any condition, but the people who are all negative Nancy about meds aren't necessarily being logical about finding all of the solutions that there are. They would never deny someone who has a heart condition the right to take medicine for that. So her point was, by not talking about it, I make it like there's a stigma around taking medication, which is totally not what I want to do. So I'm going to share with you my experience. I'm not going to talk about specific drugs because I think that's just not useful, and everybody reacts so differently. I've talked to several friends and they've all had totally different reactions to every drug. I'm just going to talk about my general experience. So I told the doctor I did not want to go on benzodiazepines because they're more addictive and they're very harmful for fetuses, and I hope to get pregnant, and I would be more anxious, which is ironic, about the effects of the drugs on the baby. And then I go to a health clinic where they actually don't give out benzodiazepines, so it worked out perfectly fine. So they were super open to trying a lot of other options, and I tried 3 different medications consecutively, not all together, but one after the next. I was on each one for about 4 to 6 weeks. I'll tell you, the first one had the opposite impact of what we were going for, and I was in a deep depression for 2 weeks, where it was really deep. The first 2 weeks I was super fuzzy, could not focus. That is when we ran the repeat episodes last summer on the podcast. And then it was a super deep depression and I really couldn't do anything or get out of bed or off the couch. And then I realized this could be the medication. So I went off the medication. I immediately felt better, which was a crazy experience and goes to show how so much of this is chemical in your brain, not just in your thoughts and your feelings and your emotions, but actually it was entirely medically induced. That one really freaked me out. The second one didn't seem to have any impact at all, which was kind of nice after like the scariness of the first one. But after 4 to 6 weeks, I was like, why am I paying for this? The third one helped me sleep way better, which was, you know, part of what it was supposed to do. And I certainly felt calmer than I had in a long time, but I gained 20 pounds in 6 weeks, which is a whole nother thing to make you feel awful and not good. And not, I mean, if you set aside all of our body image issues as women and what the media tells us we should be doing and what society tells us is our role of our bodies, just actually carrying around 20 extra pounds feels physically not fun. And so I went off that medicine. So I'm not on any medications right now, but I may be the next time you see you. I just want to be totally honest. I don't know. I'm not sure. I was super freaked out after my experience, but that doesn't mean that I'm hopeless, that there isn't something that would work. And in the case of so many of you that I've talked to, you went to the doctor and you found something that worked after a couple tries, and it has really improved your life. So that is why I'm a huge fan of the potential of medication in treating all of these issues. I have a friend who's managed her bipolar for years and decades with medication, and she truly couldn't have the life she has now if she didn't have that medication. So I'm a big fan, but it's going to be an exploration. And actually, when I first came out in the Starship is the first place I posted about this and got feedback and encouragement and a little bit of like help and how to actually talk about it on the podcast. And one of the most helpful things that somebody said was, I want you to know, you know, I've suffered from deep depression. I got it treated. She actually got it treated a couple years before because I had said when talking to her, you know, I think this is maybe something you need to see your doctor about, because she was thinking she just felt down about the business. But after talking to her, I could tell it was bigger than that. So she went to the doctor, and it was the fourth medication that she tried that worked for her. And she just knowing that made everything seem okay, because I realized it doesn't have to be the first one or else it's all like a giant fail. So that's why I shared that story with you. You're going to have totally different experiences, but you got to keep trying things, and not just medication, but other things as well. So next up, let's talk about therapy. Also recommended. So when I went in to see the doctor for the first time, I think I mentioned this in the last episode, but the thing that finally got me to see them was I had panic attacks at the thought of going to the doctor. So I realized I should go to the doctor for the panic attacks. So the entire time I'm in the office with the doctor, I'm bawling, which, let me tell you, will really freak out a doctor. So they, you know, immediately put me on the first medication, and then also immediately recommended therapy. So I found a therapist I really super love, but I'll be totally honest with you, because I know you guys have told me this as well. I avoid going because I know I'm going to cry and then have to deal with my crappy feelings all day. But this is not what I recommend. But I've heard so many of you tell me that you do the same thing. You avoid going because you don't want to feel crappy for the rest of your day. So I'll tell you this: when you're having a bad day, schedule an appointment and then make yourself go. And hopefully you find a therapist that you have a good relationship with, and they can help you learn techniques to deal with the things that are coming up in your own life. So speaking of therapy, I read a lot about cognitive behavioral therapy. Research has found it super effective, so effective that I know a lot of you in the UK already know about it, because Britain's National Health Service spent a lot of money to train more therapists in it, so more people across the UK would have access to cognitive behavioral therapy. It's the most popular and most evidence-based therapy out there, so now it's becoming the standard in a lot of countries. And the premise of it is this, and I think this can be helpful to hear about. Your thoughts impact your feelings, which impact your action. And we kind of all know that, right? Like if you, in a business sense. You believe something isn't possible, like there's no way I could make $1,000 doing this business. Then you're going to feel like meh, and then you're not going to take the actions to make $1,000. Well, we do that a lot with a lot of automatic thoughts, like, oh no, they're going to hate me if I'm late, or oh my goodness, they're like going to be so mad and blow up on me, even though you don't know. And then those feelings of like dread or fear and the thoughts that triggered them then lead you to take actions that are maybe not healthy and not and that impact your life and your relationships in some negative ways. So those thoughts then lead to feelings of frustration, anxiety, and whatever. And so in CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, what you do is you notice the feelings, how they feel in your body, you identify them, and you try to trace them back to the thoughts or the situation that sparked them. And then you kind of try to do a pattern interrupt where you say, okay, is this helpful? And am I defaulting into a cognitive distortion? So there's a whole list of cognitive distortions. I'm going to link to the list in the show notes. And I actually talked about how you can reframe a lot of these cognitive distortions in episode 115. But they're basically ways that your brain just makes assumptions that aren't helpful, like all or nothing thinking, right? Like it has to be everything or it's nothing. A lot of us slip into that. Or like future telling, like or fortune telling, like I'm sure that I know that this is absolutely how it's going to shake out. Or mind reading, where you like assume that you know what the other person's thinking when you actually have no idea. So like I said, in the show notes for this episode, there's a whole list of them. And you can find the show notes for this episode at taraswiger.com/podcast153. And I want to tell you that when you're there, you are also, you can, if you scroll down, there's a form at the bottom if you want this transcript. So I talk fast. If you want to review this, you can go to taraswiger.com/podcast153, put in your email at the bottom, and we will send you the transcript with links to everything I mentioned embedded right in there. So now this talk of CBT brings us to the first tool that I actually use and really like, and that's mood notes. So what I like about mood notes, it's an app on my phone. It teaches you CBT and reminds you to practice it at least once a day. You set up a reminder, and then it reminds you to fill it in. So when you open it up, you go up to add, and it gives you a face. You swipe up to make the face smiley, you swipe down to make it sad. And if you're feeling sad, then you can just save this. And this can just give you a view of your moods. And they do like trend lines. So you can see if there's a certain time of the month where you often feel super down, or you can look at it with your calendar and say like, oh, well, it makes sense. There was a lot of drama going on in my life right then. Or I see I felt really good on the sunny days, or you can make all kinds of connections. But so you can just do a quick save of your mood, or you can add detail. And then it asks you to write about what was going on when you felt that way. And then it asks you to select feelings. It gives you a bunch of feelings, and you can pick the percentage of how deeply you feel that thing. And they're both positive and negative emotions. So this also will then track how often you feel certain emotions, which can be really helpful. Now, if you're having negative emotions, this is where the CBT thing comes in. It says it looks like you have some negative feelings. Let's check a thought. And it walks you through what cognitive behavioral therapy walks you through. So you describe the thought, then you identify your thinking trap, which is the cognitive distortions, and it gives you a whole list. And then it makes a suggestion for how you can rethink it. And then it asks you to reassess your feelings. So just that process of identifying the thought, identifying the trap you've fallen into, and then looking at the situation without that trap filter often improves those moods, improves those feelings that you were feeling. So if you felt despair or exhausted, and then you find the cognitive trap, often just identifying it, like even if the situation hasn't gotten better, just identifying it actually improves your mood. Not always, but sometimes. And there are a lot of studies that show that just doing this process improves people's mood. So it's not just like what the app says, but there are studies that back up that this can really help. So the app is called Mood Notes. Now, if CBT is really interesting to you, there's a book that teaches you how to do it yourself, and it's very thorough and it's very big. It's called the Feeling Good Handbook. Of course, I've linked it up in the show notes. Now, so that's be both going to a therapist and doing it yourself, the next tool I actually use is meditation. So this is another method that is very heavily researched, and I found it very useful, but I want you to bear with me because many of us have a totally different connotation of the word meditation than what it actually is. So the good news is this isn't really spiritual or woo-woo at all. You don't have to talk to a higher power if you don't want to. You don't have to believe anything at all to use it. And in fact, if meditation just seems unbelievable that it would work, you might want to check out Dan Harris's book, 10% Happier. He's a journalist on ABC, a newscaster. And the subtitle for his book is something like a skeptic, something. He considers himself a skeptic. And in it, he shares his story of having a panic attack on a live national TV and then discovering meditation and how meditation kind of rewires his brain. And here's the truth of it. I feel kind of weird calling it meditation, so I just call it, like in my house, quiet time. Like I need my quiet time. But there is so much science backing up the fact that sitting quietly for at least 10 minutes a day without clinging to a thought rewires your brain and helps you deal with adversity, stress, and anxiety. So I think a lot of people think that they can't do it because you think the goal is to make your brain blank. But no way, that is never going to happen. And that's not actually what meditation is about. So I think a lot of people have this vision that like you're sitting there and you are thinking nothing, but most of us are never thinking nothing. Instead, you don't cling to a thought or let it get you in its flow and take you down the river of thinking more about that thought. So what I do is I mentally visualize it just floating away, the thought. So like, I think a thought like, oh, I got to record today's podcast. Now your typical thinking brain goes, I got to record the podcast. Oh, I'll do it about this. Oh, I don't want to forget to mention this. And then often what my brain does is it actually like rehearses the podcast. By the way, I do this with conversations. I do this with workshops. I do this with anything. It will like mentally rehearse. So during quiet time, as soon as I realize that's happening, I let it go. I watch it float away down the river and I think I'm not going to go with that thought. So I have to do the podcast. I start rehearsing and then say, wait, that's thinking. I'm going to let it go. So the next one comes up and then it floats away. Now that's the goal, is that it comes up, you immediately recognize it as a thought and you let it float away. But of course, you're actually going to get sucked into a thought and then you're thinking about it. And then you say, oh, I'm thinking about it. And you let it go. That process, recognizing when your thought has swept you up, that's all meditation is. And this isn't me. This is all of the many books and apps and podcasts and everything I've listened to about it. Meditation is you, in this framework, for what we're talking about with mental health and not like a spiritual practice, it is noticing when your thoughts are running away with you and letting them go. And doing that for 10 to 20 minutes a day or sometimes twice a day. Now, the best app I found for this and that many of my students have used and loved is Headspace. I've linked to it in the show notes. It's just called Headspace. You can find it in the App Store or the Google Play Store. There's a free 10-day challenge when you first sign up for it. It will teach you to meditate over the course of 10 days. And it has little videos and illustrations to kind of help you like picture what I just said about thoughts floating away. And it gets you in the habit. And dozens of my students have used it to successfully start this habit and have found it very useful. There are also lots of other apps you can check out. Maybe one suits you better. Now, let's talk about the next tool. The next tool that works, but I really, really wish didn't, is exercise. So of everything I'm going to talk about today, exercise is the one thing, the only thing that I find 100% effective in ensuring my anxiety and depression stay in check for at least 24 to 48 hours. Now, if I wake up and I'm too exhausted to get out of bed because I stayed up too late the night before, I'm pretty much screwed because I can't force myself to go do it. But as we talked about in that episode about what to do when you can't get out of bed, if I have my clothes set out, I know exactly where I'm going to go and I know exactly what I'm going to do. I find it much easier to just do it. I find it much easier to just do it without any thought. But it's like I have to pre-think everything so that it immediately just happens. And like I said, it's the one thing that I know is effective. Now, part of the reason why I'm saying this is because I'm reminding myself that it is effective, even though there's more activation energy, like energy that it takes to actually get the habit started. It always works. I always end up feeling better afterwards. And there was actually a study I read recently that said that we're really bad at predicting what will actually make us happier. And exercise is one of those examples. Before they exercised, people thought that exercise would improve their mood a little bit. And what they found is that their mood was actually improved a lot after they did it. And so then they did a study where they watched people over the course of a couple weeks, and people, even after experiencing a bigger effect than expected, still, when it came time pre-exercise, they thought it was going to be more unpleasant and provide them with less benefit than it actually did. So we're really bad at predicting what will make us happy, is the point of that. And we often think exercise will be worse than it is before we do it. And we underestimate how good we'll feel afterwards, even when we know that we have done it in the past. So here's what I mean by exercise. And this is in order of how easy it is to do on any given bad day. So walking my dogs a little bit longer, like around 2 to 5 blocks instead of just like down and back. That's the easiest. The second one is going on a longer walk, like to the coffee shop or Walgreens that has a red box. Both of them are with like in 20 minutes walk. The next one is going on a run around my neighborhood, put on my running shoes, just go out my door. And the next one, the most hardest one to do, the most activation energy required, is going to the gym and lifting very heavy weights. Now I can do the first one, walking my dogs a little farther, even on a really low day. And if I do, I feel better. If I wake up and immediately put on my workout clothes before I can even think about it, to leave my house on the run or to the gym, I'm guaranteed a day where I'm super high functioning, even on certain times of the month. Ladies, you feel me? And even when I've had a bad night or have trauma going on in my life or stress about all kinds of things that stress you out, right? Working out helps. That doesn't mean I don't feel stressed or I'm not upset. It just helps it from becoming a day where the anxiety or depression are the thing that's winning. You know what I mean? So when you look at diagnoses of mental health, the question is not like, do you feel sad and do you feel stressed? Because everybody does. That's healthy, normal levels of emotion. Where it becomes a disorder or you get diagnosed is when it is actually impacting your life negatively. So exercise just lifts it from impacting my life negatively to being a functioning level of feelings. So I listed these activities specifically so that we would know what I mean by exercise, but also because all of these are about more than just sweating. So actually sweating releases endorphins and makes your body chemically feel better, but all of these have other built-in effects. So walking and running outside get me outside in the sunshine, and at this time of year, get me seeing the flowers, but also the grass and the clouds, all things that remind me that there's a bigger world outside of my head and my stress. And I find that to be incredibly useful in dealing with this. So I specifically, when I'm on a run or a walk, this is a little insight into the weirdness of my head, I specifically look for systems that work together without human interference. So like the tree that flowered, the grass that grew, the leaves that changed colors without me even doing anything. And sometimes that's what my anxiety needs, is a reminder that I am not running the world. I am not keeping things together. Things are staying together. It's okay. I don't have to be on top of everything. This is really big for me. When I said that, I just got a bunch of more hearts on Instagram. So I think that it's not just me that feels like that. So that's why running and walking outside can be so useful. The sunshine, of course, but also the recognition of a bigger system than just what's in my head. Now, then weightlifting's benefits, and the reason why I said very heavy weights, on top of all the endorphins from sweating, is that when done for just a couple of days, a few weeks in a row, I absolutely feel stronger. So my back and shoulders are straighter and less slumpy, and that strength is both physical, like I can lift heavy groceries. Like when I first started doing weight, which was actually just body weight workouts. By the way, I recommend the book and the app, You Are Your Own Gym. It's all body weight exercises. You can do it in your house. I did that for 12 weeks back in 2014. But after the first 3 weeks, I was able to like lift groceries on my own. I did not realize how weak I was until I started doing those exercise and saw such a great increase in like just life stuff I could do. Like now I can get things off the tallest shelf in my closet that are heavy and like pull them down and know I'm going to be okay and not like hurt myself. But so it's physical, like I can lift heavy groceries, but it's also mental. Like I'm strong enough to handle this. There's something about an embodied sense of strength that can be very helpful with when you encounter things that are mentally stressful and need mental and emotional strength and resilience. So that's why I mentioned lifting heavy weights. A lot of people have experienced that. There's also a lot of good research that backs up why that is helpful, specifically for dealing with mental health issues. Because again, we are not talking about your body as a thing on public display. We're talking about it as the thing that you live in and as part of helping you stay healthy and helping your brain feel good. So speaking of helping your brain feel good, the next tool is essential oils. So when I first posted about my anxiety, depression coming out story on the Starship, the one remedy that was recommended more than everything else, more than exercise, more than drinking more water, more than giving up sugar, more than all of these other things, which science backs up, the thing that was recommended more than any other, I thought was a little crazy, and that was essential oils. And I was like, the smelly stuff my mom's really into. So my mom recently got really into essential oils and she's telling me about it all the time. And so I told her, my Starship captains keep talking about it as a solution that they use. And so she sent me home with a diffuser and some lavender and lemon and eucalyptus and said, well, like, just go try it. So a total skeptic, but I did some research and there's an increasing amount of studies that back it up. So a few oils like lavender and bergamot, which is orange, have been super well researched, especially for reducing work-related stress. They do a lot of tests in work-related settings. And for people who are hospitalized and are feeling anxious or panicky around their hospitalization, or they're having trouble sleeping in their hospitalization. So there's a lot of studies like that. And also people with mild depression and even in some cases pain relief. So the reason why these oils work for anxiety and depression, and they're so good at changing or regulating mood and focus, is that olfaction, your sense of smell, is directly connected to your limbic system, which is the area in your brain that manages memory, mood, and focus. Manages a lot of other things too. But smell is your only sense directly tied in to the limbic system. So it's where we process emotions. It's where we remember memories. It's also what triggers the fight or flight systems. So in other words, it's right where anxiety and panic hang out. So what my Starship captains told me was what they did to help with sleep was to rub lavender on their feet. And one captain does it with all of her kids when they go to bed. So she rubs lavender on the bottoms of their feet and it helps them sleep. Or they said do lavender and orange in a diffuser. Or for me, since we moved to this house, it has a really big bathtub. So I do a bath with lavender oil in it. And that's actually another thing that works really well, like to make your body feel better, is a warm bath, lavender oil, and Epsom salts, and bonus points if they're like bubbles. So the thing is it works. It works. It helps me what it does is it serves as a pattern interrupt. When, just like CBT, how you stop and you identify this feeling and then the thoughts and then the cognitive traps, and that's often enough to change a mood. My theory is that's part of the reason essential oils are working for me. So now there's studies that back up that actually show it reduces anxiety and it reduces stress. But for me, it's almost like bringing meditation, like noticing the thoughts and deciding not to be sucked in into any moment. Because I stop and I ask, so what oil would help with this? Or I think, oh, I'll put on some lavender in the diffuser. Or, oh, I can rub peppermint like on my headache or on my neck. Or I'll just, put a drop of lemon or grapefruit in my water. So that right there is a moment of self-care, of asking myself, what do I need? And then providing it for myself. And just that often softens how really overwhelmed and unable to take care of myself I feel on my worst days. Now, my favorite is a mood elevating blend of orange, peppermint, and vanilla. It's called Motivate, and it's by the company doTERRA. So a lot of people recommend lavender, but I like lavender fine, but it's a little floral. I like the peppermint orangey, like food related, and it's called Motivate. That's my most favorite one. I kind of am showing it on Instagram all the time because I'm using it all the time, or putting it on my diffuser bracelet. But so I've gotten super into it, and I've done a lot of research, especially after a friend started she knew it was one of the things I was looking into, and she had been working with doTERRA as a business, and she asked me to start working with some of her doTERRA sellers. So when I was just looking into it, especially as a biz model, I found it really hard to find the information I need or to find the studies I need. And by the way, I have like an Evernote folder full of all the things I've researched. And lots of you have been asking me questions about it. So I am going to actually do a webinar where I explain way more about this. So I've told you just a little bit that I use them for anxiety and depression, but what we'll talk about in the webinar is how they actually work, how you can use them, and my absolute favorites, and also how you can order them if you want to. So to come to this workshop, you go to taraswiger.com/EO. I'll be sure to link it in the show notes and in the transcript. But right now, you can go to taraswiger.com/EO, and I'm going to hold it this Friday. So you're probably listening to this on Wednesday. It'll be on Friday. If you're listening to this later or in the future, and if you go to that link, you can sign up for more info, and it will send you to the webinar recording and a bunch of information there, everything we cover on the webinar. So if you're listening to this like 2 weeks or 2 years later, that's still the page to go to, taraswiger.com/EO. That is what I'm using to manage my anxiety right now. CBT, meditation, exercise, essential oils. And I'm going to be honest, when I was putting this episode together, I was pretty annoyed. This is what everything said would help. Everything I read when I was first starting to recognize that what I've been dealing with was anxiety and panic disorder, this is what everybody recommended. This is what all the research says will help. This is what the research backs up. But I wanted to find something special or extraordinary. I'm going to be like, look at this brand new thing I found. But that's not how it turned out. But what I'm hoping is that my specific recommendations of apps and books and oils have helped you, or maybe just hearing about it in a different format have helped you, or maybe you didn't go and research for a million years before you decided to deal with it. So I really hope that this episode is the push you need to do something, to try something, to experiment. Rub on some lavender, go for a long walk, look at all the things in the world that are working without you noticing. Try a meditation app or the Mood Notes Act. And I want to end this with a suggestion for when you don't know what to do and everything I said seems overwhelming. You're like, oh, I have to put on shoes. I'd have to find oils. So if you're feeling like that, if it all feels too impossible, here is a short list of power-ups. And in the month of Biz Love, we talked about doing power-ups to get you motivated to do the work. So I'm going to give you a list. Pick one thing from this list and do it, okay? Like right now. Drink a whole glass of water. Go walk in the sunshine. Get dressed. Brush your hair. Brush your teeth if you haven't yet. It's okay if you haven't yet. No judgment, dude. Listen to your favorite song. This is one of the things I was just telling my husband. It's one of the things that always changes my mood, and yet I resist it, and I don't know why. Eat something with protein. So I've actually linked in the show notes to Vega protein bars. They're my favorite because they're kind of like having a chocolate bar, but it's full of protein. Sniff some lavender or orange essential oil. Lavender if you want to chill out. Orange if you want to focus and be more up. Also, pet your pet. If you have one, spend some time snuggling them. So give yourself permission to take care of yourself, even if that just means laying on the couch and listening to podcasts all day, or reading, or doing one of these things that takes care of yourself and not working. It is going to be okay. Tell someone and try things. So I wish you an enthusiastic week and a very good, healthy day.